don't want to steal any of her thunder, but I saw her presentation during Source, and it's really, really wonderful. We're all in for a treat.
Hello, so my name is Irwin. I am presenting my thesis research on what honor the female sex, representations of women's power and influence in the Littoral Psalter. I actually completed this research over the summer at Columbia University during a research fellowship, where I got to just sort of play with a lot of the manuscripts that they had in their archives. While I didn't get to play with the Littoral Psalter because it's actually located in the museum in London, I got to look at some of the similar psalters and choir books of the same 14th century, so I could work on some comparative analysis. I also got to visit the Book of Kells, and I forgot to mention that during my previous presentation, in Trinity College in Dublin while I studied abroad. So it was like lots of hands-on experience went into this research. But the main thing is that I decided to turn my research, the written project, into a video essay in order to make it more accessible. Because the Littoral Psalter is actually completely digitized, I was like, hey, why shouldn't the analysis of it also be digitized? So without further ado, I'm just going to let myself carry on. And the audio has been finicky today, so just please forgive me and be patient.
The medieval woman is like a potted plant. She is limited and confined within certain societal boundaries that seek to restrict and control the ways in which she spreads her roots, the ways in which she uses her power and her influence. For example, moralizing biblical stories and characters were often used as methods of regulating the ways in which women use their power and their influence, by including examples of deviant women, such as Eve, who happened to fall a man, or Delilah, who sabotaged the male hero, were both juxtaposed against the pious and obedient Virgin Mary, who was often regarded as the ultimate Christian faithful. These characters and stories were used to regulate the ways in which women used their influence and condemn the women who misused it. Using a 14th century decorated manuscript, I argue that women's power and influence were systematically restricted and contained within the margins of accepted society. I observed the ways in which such restrictions visually manifested themselves within the marginal artwork of decorated manuscripts and allowed for rhetorically charged reading experience, meant to deliberately associate imagery with text in an effort to promote endorsed behaviors and narratives to which women were meant to ascribe. Decorated manuscripts are objects produced in the Middle Ages, which occurred between the 5th and 15th centuries. Now, they were considered decorated because the text within the manuscript would be framed or surrounded by very beautiful, rich, and ornate decorations that often commented on, complemented, or visualized specific portions of the text. Usually, the artwork depicted folkloric scenes or represented different imagery that a medieval audience would be familiar with, which made the reading experience very personalized and very deliberately dedicated to the specific patron or reader of the text. For the purposes of my research, I have selected a manuscript known as the Littoral Psalter. A psalter is a private devotional which contains all 150 Catholic psalms, including a liturgical calendar. I selected the Littoral Psalter specifically because of its very beautiful and extremely deliberate decoration. Sir Geoffrey Luttrell, who was a prominent English knight and landowner in the 14th century, commissioned this particular psalter. This manuscript is especially fascinating because of its very deliberate rhetorical imagery and female representation. I argue that the female imagery was deliberately used in order to promote and uphold established limitations by negotiating positive and negative imagery within the same manuscript. Essentially, it literally illustrates what a good woman looks like and what a more challenging woman looks like. Now I'm going to dive into some of the actual imagery that appears within the manuscript. I'm going to start by looking at a scene in which Sir Geoffrey Luttrell is depicted atop a decorated horse, which suggests that he's going out to some sort of war or a tournament, specifically due to the decorations that appear on the horse. Yet two women are also present in this scene: his wife, who hands him his helmet, and his daughter-in-law, who hands him his shield. These are very idyllic representations of aristocratic women because if Sir Geoffrey Luttrell is going off to war or to a tournament, then these women would have been left in charge of his household. They would have been the mere fact that they've been entrusted with this kind of power shows that they do have power and influence within the society, yet it is contained within grace and elegance. I'm specifically interested in the ways in which they're handing him his armor. They are doing it with one hand. So they're being represented as these strong bearers of his household arms, yet they're doing it in a ladylike manner. Much like the Virgin Mary, they are idyllic representations of serving the will of their Lord and their community through their actions. Yet their power is not their own. It must be used in service of the accepted male hierarchy and within the accepted male hierarchy. Now, imagine Sir Geoffrey Luttrell is reading and consuming this manuscript when he comes across this image. Does he think, yes, this is exactly the way in which aristocratic women are meant to look or act like? My male-dominated world is in order. Now imagine his wife comes across this image. Would she have found it acceptable or even to be an accurate representation of herself? This next imagery is a representation of a more challenging woman. It is a depiction of St. Catherine, who was a prominent figure in the early church because she went up against a pagan emperor and debated with him about religion and philosophy, and he was so threatened by her that he had her tortured and killed. Now we know that this is a representation of St. Catherine simply because of the spiked wheel that she is holding, which is one of the many torture devices used against her. Legend has it, she would lie flat on the ground and the wheel would roll over her. However, every time it came in contact with her skin, it would shatter. Additionally, she is crowned in gold and has a halo surrounding her head, which is usually representative of a holy figure within these decorated manuscripts. Her life and her story impacted thousands, and she got even more to convert to Catholicism, including the emperor's own wife. So what we have here is a very interesting and powerful figure in the church. In order to reach this status, she had to challenge the establishment of hierarchy. She had to find a way to insert herself into a male-dominated conversation, and in doing so, she flipped the hierarchy on its head. She challenged the idea of what a pious woman looked like. She complicated what a Christian woman was supposed to look like, or even act like. On the page facing the image of St. Catherine is a scene of a woman beating a man with a distaff, which is a tool commonly used to weave or spin yarn. The man is crouched below this woman, begging and pleading as she utterly humiliates him through her abuse, using a traditionally female tool. It's interesting to see this scene displayed so closely to St. Catherine because it might represent the same sort of humiliation that the emperor felt when he interacted with Catherine. It is a complicated role reversal that challenges the limitations placed on women's power and influence. It breaks the pot that women were planted in. Now imagine that the Luttrell women might have encountered this image. Would they have found it interesting? Interesting enough to start challenging their own hierarchy? Maybe Sir Luttrell had found this image and he thought it was disturbing, or maybe he thought it was funny because it never would have happened in real life. The broader rhetorical implications of this imagery are especially fascinating because of the myriad of interpretations and reactions that each reader might have had when interacting with the manuscript. The Luttrell women, for example, might have interpreted it and taken it into their own lives and started challenging their male-dominated hierarchy, or found new ways to live within it. This is especially interesting to look at in a modern rhetorical context because it reveals a lot about the evolution of the ways in which women have been represented historically. In this first image, you see a 1950s Thai advertisement in which a woman crouches below a man subserviently handing him his breakfast. The caption reads, "Show her it's a man's world." This is interesting to me because it is very similar to the very first Luttrell image that I showed. It is the systematic perpetuation of the idyllic service and obedience role that women have been forced into. This next image is from a series titled In a Parallel Universe, in which a Lebanese photographer switches the gender roles, placing the man in a more subservient position. It's interesting because it challenges just as overtly as the St. Catherine or as the abusive woman do in the Luttrell, and reveal the historic and modern struggles and complications that women still undergo in the representations in media. This is a fascinating fascinating dynamic where a woman, in order to be taken seriously, needs to take an aggressive stance that humiliates or overpowers a man and places him in the more subservient position. There's really no equity between the two. So whenever we encounter images such as these in the future, we need to ask ourselves very specific questions. Why these women? Why here? And most importantly, what do these images do to promote or challenge certain narratives? Thank you.
Yay. Thank you. Questions for Laura?
Laura, I found out your Anglophile is spelled honor that way.
That's actually a quote from Catherine Kazan, where she describes sort of the similarities, sort of like very similar research that she conducted as mine, so I decided to just pull that from her.
Good.
Yeah.
I want to caution you against reading too much in. My wife came out to the car today and handed me a couple of things that I forgot. But she's subservient at all to me. I don't think she would. It's not at all. And I caution you against this sort of thing. Plus, this lady, how I interpreted it, she's simply being a servant. Can you comment on that?
So usually, a lot of my research...
With a distaff.
Yes, with the distaff. So it's interesting, I am making these assumptions and these associations, and that's what they are, assumptions and associations, because at the end of the day, we have so little from this time period, we have so little analysis. I can say, certain things with certainty because of the relationship of the imagery with the specific text that it's associated with. Sometimes when it comes to, if you're familiar with when human beings are created into like hybrid creatures in manuscripts, sometimes women are created into hybrid creatures in manuscripts in sort of like a monstrous form. And the text that is associated with those images speaks of the devil, speaks of sinners, and speaks of what happens to people who don't follow the Lord. And that same sort of text reappears when it's next to this disobedient woman. So these relationships, I don't believe that they're made by mistake, and that's why I can say the things with this a level of certainty that I do. And my mentor at Columbia, he also cautioned me against that as well, because it's a very tricky line to walk through as a medievalist.
Yeah.
So when it comes to collecting that sort of evidence, I turn to Catherine Kazan, I turn to writers of that time period, especially female writers who express their perspectives and their experiences, and that can also influence, my own arguments.
I found this, I think, even maybe more interesting the second time. The little things I picked up on, I don't remember noticing from source, but it's the same video, right? Yeah. Okay. I know that in a lot of medieval German texts that are not necessarily religious, but are often about love, there's a lot of imagery where the woman is strategically placed above the knight who's courting her. But it's always because this idea, I think, that male subservience to women is ultimately going to win him something that he's out to get. I mean, both sort of legally and physical possession of her. And I thought it was really interesting that in these images that you showed, you made clear that this is about women having sort of some active role, but it's always about maintaining male orders. This isn't a question, this isn't annoying. I think it's really a comment. But I thought that was really fascinating. I think it's a really wonderful job of articulating sort of the portrayal of female agency, that they are involved, but they are not getting anything out of, the man it's a jousting image, right? He's going off to fight. And so I assume there are many of these images in the piece. So I was sort of wondering, I guess, one more about when you see, is it all, how are women interacting with men? Is this jousting the image, are there more of those, are there others in which women are sort of collaborating but in this, I think you're saying, subservient way? And then I was also just wondering, you said that Columbia doesn't have this manuscript, is it all digitized? I was also just wondering about how exactly that were able to access the manuscript.
Yeah, so it's completely, the whole thing is online. They've scanned every single page and uploaded it. And as to your first question, that's actually really interesting because that is another thing that my mentor at Columbia cautioned me against. He was like, you can't just make these assumptions that like women aren't doing anything or aren't contributing to society or anything like that, or are considered good because they have the standard of like the Virgin Mary, so they have to like, there are standards that they can set, right? So in other images and in other portions of my own research, I've discovered how, let's say, a peasant woman is helping with the harvest, or she's like making some sort of clothes, or she's like caring for a child or something like that. So they're like portrayed as very active members of society, which is always interesting in the context of power, when you look at power, which is the focus of this research. Because like it looks like they have certain agency. They can take care of the households, right? It's like no, but they're being allowed to. Only in his absence, they're helping because it's part of their community duty. So it's interesting to see play out.
Yeah, no, my own comment is a caution just as I'm really interested in how they're articulating really well.
I'd be cautious also because when you're dealing with a society that's basically operating as subsistence, you're not allowing people. It's like pioneer network. They have absolutely egalitarian in the West. So you're not allowing anyone to do anything. They're both pulling in the same direction. And I'm very cautious about drawing too many conclusions, particularly on the non-aristocratic.
No, yeah, absolutely, and that's why a lot of what I say is coming from is also based in religion and religious hierarchy and how these roles are manifested through how they perceive scriptural text and how they perceive these relationships within scripture as well.
Do you think any of this relates to how this stuff is being further taught in academic languages? Because while the people commonly have heard of this, most of them probably didn't have access, obviously, to these manuscripts. It's primarily the teachers, the people of the church. So do you think it was more to help shape their views on what they pass along to be more common in the teachings?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, by the 14th century, no peasant folk or common folk would have had access to a manuscript like this. So this is that's why I mostly say, like, the literal women are the ones who are consuming this, so how are they, receiving the information? Because no one else is really able to access it at the end of the day. And it's a really interesting observation, and it's on another one of the gaps of medievalist research, because with Pizan, she's also one of the only female writers that had access to a lot of her work to be published as well. So we have her perspective, but it's just hers at the end of the day. So we can only assume what happens in the mind of medieval peasants, but we can also, like I was saying, it's very religious. So if they're getting the same sort of religious education on one perspective, and you assume that they're getting the same on the other end. It's just one has visual imagery attached and probably has a deeper education in it than the other, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask now Professor McCracken, your advisor, to come up. She'll say a few words and give you your honor scroll in recognition of everything that Laura has done. So those of you who work with Laura don't need me to tell you how smart she is. So if my husband bet me $10, I would cry. Laura displays a level of courage and craftsmanship that we should all hope to achieve in the course of our lives. Good. I don't want to hear about what she's not telling you is she's a writing and rhetoric major who went to Columbia and in 8 weeks onboarded herself enough to do this research, to understand
not just medieval texts, but the role of rhetoric and writing in medieval life and art. And she was working with graduate students and students from across the country that she had never met before. So she dove in with this courage and this passion for learning, and that's the craftsmanship part, because she takes her work very seriously. She isn't happy just understanding the content. She wants to understand the context around the content and what it means for everyone else. And it's just, you're the reason we do this work. So we are so proud of you.